Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Mind Your Own Business. I'm Steve Weaver, Vistage Chair and host of this podcast, and I have the privilege and pleasure today to be here with Luis Fernandez of Schooley Mitchell. He's a strategic partner there, and we know each other pretty well. You got an amazing business reputation, and you're probably the most popular guy in Arizona right now because you help people grapple with inflation and save money, which has always been popular in business. But man, right now, everybody I know who's in business is just like being hit with price increases left and right. So what are you hearing out there? What are the CEOs and business owners that you talk to, what are they experiencing?
Yeah, the price increase thing is absolutely real. And I think a lot of folks, you know, besides the operational disruptions that we had during the pandemic, or the early stages of pandemic, now we've kind of learned from it and started to adapt our operations. But so you had, kind of a pause in releasing of goods, creating a backlog, which anybody who's ever been in any sort of shipping or manufacturing or anything like that, that if you stop, that line keeps getting longer, right? It doesn't just, oh, okay, we can start tomorrow exactly where we are. You've got a whole backlog of other things. And, you shut down in a factory for a week, it could take you 6 months to catch that up, right. So we've had that supply chain backlog. And then we had, the evergreen guy who got stuck in the Suez Canal, causing everybody to go around, just getting goods has been difficult. And then, as happens, you've got a supply and demand. This is the law of supply and demand. You can't get around it. So you've got less supply. The demand has stayed the same. The price of acquiring those goods gone up. And some businesses are comfortable paying a little extra to get on a boat. And if you're in shipping right now and you realize, hey, some people are going to pay me extra, the price of getting those goods goes up too. I mean, we have friends that containers that used to cost $3,000 are now costing 23 grand to get the same amount of goods, which is just like an absurd number when you start thinking about you've built a business and most guys are running 5 to 7% margins off of that $3,000 price. This is now we're talking your margin went from 7 to like 2, right? So you gotta find some adjustments in there. Meanwhile, a lot of companies were quick to lay people off early on in the pandemic, which has caused, which sort of spearheaded the great resignation, as we're calling it. But, you've got folks starting businesses. We've got a lot of new businesses being started. They kind of took advantage of the unemployment benefits and they, did that. But now, again, it's law of supply and demand. So the demand has stayed the same, but the supply of employees decreased. So hiring people is getting more expensive, and not just people, but the type of people. I have business owners that require people like CNC operators, welders, mechanics, heavy equipment technicians, like these kinds of folks. We push people towards these university degrees, our kids, right? And so there's an aging population of folks that are highly skilled in those. The ones that are remaining, well, they demand higher wages. And so this is kind of like a snowball as you can keep going, because, you have jobs that are advertised. And, I used to be in this business some time ago, and I was trying to hire a heavy equipment technician, and the guy was already making $38 an hour and our starting wage was 22. It's like, okay, we've got a massive gap here to get experienced folks in, so you've got inflationary costs, you got a supply chain disruption, the great resignation. There's a lot of pressure on businesses. And then we've got $15 an hour that just passed in Tucson. This is kind of like the new standard, a minimum wage increase. I mean, running a business and staying ahead is just staying where you were 3 years ago is exceptionally difficult. But those that win, that make it through the next couple of years, they're going to gobble up a whole bunch of little guys that didn't make the right calls. That's my prediction, I guess.
So let's say our goal is not to be one of those gobbled up little or medium sized guys. unless we sell and do well. And, that's a whole separate podcast. So as I think about it, my revenue potentially is going up because more cash in the market than ever before. Consumers have it, businesses have it. And their theme right now is we're going to do a lot better than last year, which wasn't good. And all our economic comparisons are against years that were really pretty bad ever since COVID. So I'm going to bring in more revenue, but my costs are growing faster than I ever thought and by a greater percentage. So I actually could bring in more money, sell more stuff, and make a lot less, which then destabilizes my company. People try to easily go to layoffs or something like that, which is getting rid of your talent, which is never smart.
Yep.
Why do business owners avoid taking a look at their hard costs, their reoccurring costs? I mean, there seems to be an aversion to it.
So I'll tell you the first thing is that, and I've heard other consultants, business consultants say this as well, is that folks will target their biggest buckets first because their assumption is I can make a smaller impact on this big bucket and it'll have a bigger impact on the business overall, which, okay, I can see your logic behind that, but I tell you that if you mess with somebody's pay, with somebody's benefits, or you mess with the head count, that's an emotional expense. You're going to piss people off. Okay. And it's an indicator of a relationship breakdown for the employee. Okay. It becomes a perception of a one-way loyalty thing. Like, oh, you expect me to be loyal to you, but the first sign of trouble, you're going to cut, my, food from my family's table. Right. This is the equivalent of saying, I need to lose 10 pounds. So I'm going to cut off my leg below the knee. And I lost 10 pounds. Right. Yes. You effectively did achieve the goal that you set, but you set the wrong goal. The goal was not, I want to lose 10 pounds, right? Because you did, but now you're hobbled for the rest of your life. The goal is I want to reduce my body fat percentage to a more manageable level because of all the benefits that come with having that reduced body fat percentage. The thing about that is cutting off the leg is quick and it's effective at achieving this goal of the scale. With losing weight, it can take a while. It requires tenacity on the part of the person. It requires discipline. It takes time. And sometimes you may not even see it for a little while. It's not till you do these before and afters that you realize, oh, there it is, right? In business, the translation is identifying waste, reducing that waste, eliminating, that waste, and then making some of those decisions. Now, you could talk about like lean operations. If you're in a manufacturing environment, how do we do that? How do we get more lean? What are some of these areas? What are some of the habits? What are some of the bureaucracy that is limiting us in being able to become more streamlined and move faster, make decisions quicker to eliminate some of that waste? The reason there's aversion, I think, partly is because it's not quick. It takes some time. And also it requires buy-in. It requires everyone in the company to be joined in on this goal of cost reduction, because the best ideas are going to come from your lower level executioners. Your guy who's running a weld booth, he knows all the problems that he's tired of dealing with in his weld booth. All right. Mm-hmm. That his manager may or may not know, because but if you're looking to reduce waste, it's got to start. It's kind of like flipping this on its head. We have this goal. We want to cut waste, or we want to cut costs. So everybody's got to cut 10%, right? And we're going to flip that on its head and say, how do we identify, the costs that we can reduce, and then giving some sort of incentive for the employees to want to join in and do that process. So that's part of the issue. And then the second is, when it comes to sort of the categories that we've jumped in on, is that there's an information imbalance with a vendor and the person buying a product, in that the vendor knows the economy that they're in. and they understand the pricing mechanisms. But so, for example, do you know what a cell phone plan should cost today? Right? Maybe, maybe not, but or what a car costs today. You don't know. You know when you start shopping, and then you got to shop all these different things, and then you start to get a feel for, oh, it should be about this number, right? But if you're dealing with all the things that we talked about, and it comes to, hey, we need cell phones for all the managers. Okay, just get everybody an unlimited plan because I don't want to pay any overages. It's a fixed cost. I know what it is. That's it. Everybody gets this unlimited plan, and you just execute on that. Well, how much can that be costing you? You know, and not understanding that, fixing that and optimizing that service and figuring, you know, taking the time to look at what are we actually using here, right? If we're talking about waste identification, that's that little body fat thing, right? It's eating the right meal every single day. It's what are we actually using? How do we optimize this service? And that takes a little bit of time, and it takes effort and going through and finding those things. So there's, you know, that's kind of like a push and pull cost associated with finding all of these things, and it's more tedious. Whereas if we reduce our 401k match, we can hit the goal today, right?
Yeah. So doing it easy is one problem. Knowing what I don't know, you know, is a problem because there's a lot about what I'm buying I have no idea. Maybe the way I've always done it intrudes. So if I want to protect, I mean, make it a second or third tier kind of effort to really look at employee side. I want to run efficiently, but I don't want to cut off my leg. How could I mean, I know I could do it myself, but how could I, as a business owner, enlist someone like you to figure out what's really going on at that front line, middle line of my company so that I can reduce costs and do it without a lot of customer or employee impact?
Yeah. Well, and that's the beautiful thing about our business in particular is that when it comes to, we're not dealing with the personnel side. I'm dealing with what I call the non-emotional expenses, you know, telecom, waste, internet, merchant service providers. Like if the trash can that's outside changes colors and gets picked up less often, people don't care, right? And actually, maybe one person will notice that and then forget about it. You cut, you know, Jimmy from the team, everybody cares and everybody will notice it. And people start thinking, am I next? Right. So these are kind of like the non-emotional type expenses. And so eliciting an expert, like we know that if I want to establish a new brand or a new marketing plan, I look for somebody who does branding or somebody that does marketing, you know, but when we talk about cost reduction, we don't look at folks that focus specifically on cost reduction. We look towards those financial administrators and we say, hey, where can I cut costs? And that's not their core competency. Theirs is a matter of, you know, accounting is a matter of objective facts and realities of this is where you are. An accountant may be able to identify, especially with some experience, it may be able to identify, it appears that this is probably outside of norm, right? Whereas if some, you know, you may benefit from having a health insurance broker per se, that their job is to read that 2,000 page health insurance bill that just came out of Congress that the congressman didn't even read, right? They're going to read it and they're going to say, hey, here's the impacts to your business, right? Because that's their job. That's what they're going to focus on. I wouldn't go to my head of HR and say, hey, what do I need to worry about with this new bill? That's not a core competency for them, right? So it's kind of saying, how do you benefit and why should you have a conversation? Because you have a conversation with somebody that this is what they do. You know, they're an expert, you know, and the more niche somebody is, the better they can be at that specificity. You know, you open it up into too many options and the skill set in all these different, you know, the jack of all trades versus ace at none, right? Like I want to have a handful of aces. Now what I could do is make sure that I only have those on a fractional basis. So I'm not paying to have an ace on staff at all times, right? And that's how I can have a handful of aces because I'm only paying for this much of that ace's time.
So these non-emotional expenses, I love the way you label that. Embedded in that is that we've done business this way forever. This is the way we've structured our company. These are kind of, it's like gravity. We never even think about it.
Right.
And it's really hard for us to examine it. So you have a process that you go in and you take a look at this stuff and then make recommendations. I mean,
Yeah.
as we sort of wind up, tell me what happens once I call. I mean, obviously you're a wonderful person to talk to, but once we get past the fun, what is it I'm going to be required to do, or how much work does this take? But me and my CFO, just give me an idea of what you're going to do.
So everything we're going to. Yeah. So everything we're going to do is it's all going to be objective. There's not going to be any subjective stuff. We're going to look at invoices. We're going to say, hey, today you're paying this, tomorrow you're going to be paying this. And the way we figure that gap, that space in the middle, first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for any errors that we find in billing. One example is there was a company that their company address had been labeled as a home address by a shipping company. And so every package that left the business was getting charged a residential surcharge. And it was something like an $800,000 billing error that got corrected. And that's gone permanently, right? So that's an additional, a cost per item that goes away forever. So we'll look for billing errors, and then we look for optimization. I kind of gave an example about, hey, everybody just have the unlimited phone line, right? So that's part of the optimization. Another thing we find a lot is during the employee out processing. So somebody quits or somebody retires or you fire somebody, you have a process of closing out all their digital assets. Some things like their cell phone bill never got canceled. And maybe your intent is, we'll just transfer that number to another person, but does that really happen? How long does that sit idle? There's a lot of problems with that. And now, that person is the new guy gets phone calls that were intended for the old person. There's a whole thing with not canceling those. But if you have that could be another 50 some odd dollars a month, $75 a month. You have 100 of those, that cost adds up. So that's the second thing we do is we look for the optimization of services. And then the third thing that we do is we actually get on and we jam out to some hold music, and we call people and we call service providers and we ask for quotes. The difference when we call for a quote is that we know what the price should be because we've already optimized your service. I know what I'm calling about because this is what it should be. And I also, because we've got 27,000 clients and we've saved $500 million to companies all over North America, is that when we call Verizon and they say, that plan costs X. No, you are charging my client in Miami this much for that very same, your price should be this. Okay, fine, we'll do that, right? And then I can call and get all these different quotes, and then I can go back to your current service provider and say, hey, here's all your options. You can stay here and save 17%, or you can switch and save 20%, or you can switch to this guy and save 25%. If you do that, you got to buy all this new technology. So that's not really my recommendation, is you're going to go, right? So, but you have options. And as far as you said, how much time does that require for the person that hires us? A few hours, really. It's just a matter of giving me access and letting me look at some invoices. And then we run with the rest. Depending on how many locations you have, but probably, 2 hours per location. It doesn't require the CEO or the CFO, just whoever is the facilities manager. Give me some access to some invoices. And within a couple hours, we can have all the information that we need and then go off. And then usually that whole process, all three stages, takes between 6 and 8 weeks to get done before we come back to the Valley report.
So I call you.
We don't take any money up front, by the way. We get paid out of the savings. So we have taken on the risk on your behalf as a business owner. So we know that we're good at our jobs, because it talked about us being aces. So we know we'll get paid in the end, but we're just going to say, hey, you don't have to take on that risk. We'll take on the risk of whether or not we find anything.
So it's a win-win. I don't pay unless I save. I'm going to benefit, period. 6, 8 weeks, call it 8 weeks, 2 months. So make a phone call 2 months later. possibly avoid ever having to touch the emotional expenses. Because if the way I've always done it isn't the smartest way, which it never is, I mean, there's always something. But if I can save a part of that, I then can kind of get to that body fat percentage that you talked about and stop paying for stuff I don't need and operate much more efficiently.
Yeah. And, you know, we have on average, we increase the profit margin about 2%, the total margin about 2% on average. Obviously there's, you know, wild swings in there, but if you think about it, right, if you've just lost 3 or 4% of your margin due to all these increasing costs, you are probably in a very high stress state to put, like, you need to make changes quickly, right? So if 2 months later your margin can be up 2%, how much more time does that buy you to identify waste and to make these decisions? And, you know, maybe like if you heard the beginning of this and you're like, there's no way, I don't have time to go through this lean operations and do all this stuff. I got to make a decision now. We've got to cut costs today because I'm not sure we're going to be around by the end of the year if we don't do that, right? Can I buy you that time? Can I buy you that time so that you can put this stuff into play? And then, you know, when we leave 22, you've just upped your margins permanently 4, 5, 6% from where you were at the going into 22, because you've been able to implement all these different changes and you've had the time to make those calls.
So if you could do me a favor, tell me the phone number to call. And I know you're on LinkedIn and I've watched your videos. And for those of our viewers who want a really fun set of videos to watch, you do kind of some irreverent type programming. I'll leave it at that and let my viewers come check you out. But how do I get a hold of you?
So you can hit me up at 520-500-7015. That is my cell phone. If I can answer it, I will. Don't self-select yourself and say this isn't a good time to call. Just call. If it's not a good time, I won't answer it. Right. And then we'll call you back when it is. Yeah, so that's a great way to get a hold of me. And LinkedIn is also, you know, that's my social media home. I do spend a lot of time there. So it's a good place to get a hold of me as well.
Oh, good. Well, hey, I appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise. I know a lot of us with businesses are a little scared right now, and fear is, I always say, a sign of intelligence. Paralyzing fear is not what we're looking for.
Right.
But, you know, clearly you're a great resource. And if anybody's got an issue with margins contracting due to costs, I mean, it's worth a phone call and the investment of a few hours, it seems like.
I'm not going to disagree with that, Steve.
I didn't expect you to. Anyways, good to see you. I appreciate your time and looking forward to continuing to, you know, our relationship and our dialogue.
Me too.
Always learn something.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.